Why do I love Star Wars? I've asked myself this question more times than I can remember. And ultimately, I don't know. There really isn't an answer. But what I do know is that, over the past decade of my life, Star Wars has held a large influence over who I am today. The movies first brought me into this universe. The novels, TV shows, and comics have kept me here. Knights of the Old Republic, Jedi Academy, and countless other legends of the past reaffirmed my enjoyment of this franchise. The heroic story of Revan and Bastila, the wakeful journey of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the tragic fall of Anakin Skywalker, Star Wars is a tale of sorrow, joy, anticipation, betrayal, perseverance, redemption, all these things and more. When Star Wars 7: The Force Awakens came out, I admit, I lost hope in the franchise's ability to project the feeling of fulfillment, of life, that had appealed to me in the past. Short-lived spectacle took precedence over the story, over the long-term development of each of its characters. It yelled, here's some more Star Wars. You guys like this, right? It tried so hard to replicate the magic of the original trilogy that it ended up missing the point entirely. A decade ago, a gaming company called BioWare took the Star Wars franchise and did something revolutionary. It threw out the original characters, reused tropes and overall conventions surrounding Star Wars, and created something that, while completely unexpected, had just enough hint of familiarity to make it the Star Wars we know and love. What they ended up with was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This is what I enjoyed most about Rogue One, that its writers and producers weren't afraid to head down a different path. This movie did exactly what makes Star Wars great in many fans' eyes. It dared to try something new. As in any great story, the characters carried the narrative of Rogue One from start to finish. Even still, I admit that at first, I didn't like them. Jyn, Cassian, Krennic, Galen, the Guardian of the Wills, even that crazy Rambo guy, they all felt so one-dimensional, and I couldn't really predict how they would develop as the story pressed on. Strangely enough, this was their greatest strength. Because they were so unpredictable, every decision they made, every new scene they were in, was a surprise. Their supposed superficiality had belied an incredible depth, and I enjoyed the movie far more because of it. As time went on, the characters didn't really warm up to each other as often is in action movies like these. The more the story progressed, the characters in it seemed to understand more about themselves, more about what makes them fight, what motivates them to keep going. This, ultimately, is what brought them together. And that is really just amazing. What made this movie was the extremes it went to capture the grittiness and horror of war. I recently saw a news post explaining that the film was inspired mainly by some of the older World War II exposés and dramatizations, and the idea couldn't have been better. The deaths, while seemed excessive at first, eventually really got me on a deeply emotional level. The characters didn't care for each other because they needed to for the sake of the story. No, they cared because some of them had fought together for years. Others because they cared so much for the cause they were fighting for. In other words, it was unforced camaraderie. And that's impressive. Hell, even Lord of the Rings failed creating that. Every death scene was carefully and meticulously placed. They had meaning. It wasn't death for the sake of spectacle. It was death that moved the story forward and created a true emotional narrative. And the story not having a major conflict but proceeding more like a lifeline, Jin's journey from naivety to calm resolution even in the face of death, only bolstered this effect. As the movie ended, Jin and Cassian sitting on the shore awaiting imminent death, I could only think of one thing. This is what makes Star Wars. This is why I love Star Wars. I approached this movie expecting a repeat of The Force Awakens, a repeat of the disappointment that Star Wars Rebels has turned out to be. Instead, I found myself witnessing the birth of a masterpiece. I admit, the film is not without its flaws, but honestly, I couldn't care less. There is singular merit in that those behind Rogue One understood that Star Wars is far too great to be used solely for children's entertainment. Today, I am proud to be a Star Wars fan, and look forward with delightful anticipation to what will come next in the space epic that, 30 years ago, was but a figment of imagination in an overly zealous director's mind. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.